Hi. So Pearson is a large education company. We do a range of education materials, curriculum development, education technology, assessment. And I guess when we think about social innovation, it really kind of has two sides that are very closely connected. There's the social impact side as well as the commercial imperative for us. From a kind of social perspective, it's a very interesting company to be in because as an education company, helping people learn and access educational opportunities is actually at the core of what we do. Everything we do, if we do it well, should have a measurable social impact on somebody's life. So when we think about social innovation specifically, we really are asking, but for who? Right? So how do we actually expand the reach of the company to reach lower income and underserved learners and customers around the world that our business as usual isn't currently reaching? And then on the commercial side, the education sector, like many others, is changing very quickly. There's a lot of disruption. There are new technologies coming out every day that have the potential to change everything. People's perception and even the value of education and what that means to people and that model, which is quite traditional, is also changing very rapidly. And at the same time, demand is growing very quickly as well. And we're seeing a lot of growth from emerging middle class and lower income consumers. So there's also a huge innovation and commercial imperative for a company like Pearson to stay competitive and to grow is to really figure out how to do this better. So our team actually initially started out as a partnerships team. And so we would work with large non-for-profits as well as community organizations or the UN, and we would identify a social impact issue that we were really interested in doing something about. And we would go to the business and basically look for ways to leverage core capabilities around innovation to help make an impact on that specific issue. And we still have some of these partnerships in play, and they're having a great impact. However, there were many times where we went to the business and they would say, that's just not our priority right now. That specific issue is not really what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So a couple of years ago, we decided to flip this model upside down and actually to go to the business and to say, okay, what are your business priorities or social impact priorities? And hopefully there's an overlap there. And how can we help you actually take those forward? And what we did was essentially we set up an internal incubator where we put out a call for ideas from across the business that people who actually are in the markets, who understand the local context, and also have a really good sense of what the business priorities are in that market, can come up with ideas for new products and services, submit those, and then receive seed funding as well as technical support to explore them, investigate them, and take them forward. And so we launched the incubator back in 2016. We have several ventures which are currently being incubated, and we've just actually launched a new call for ideas a couple of weeks ago. And it's been a very, very fascinating journey with obviously lots of bumps along the way and challenges, but also I would say a lot of small victories as well. And we are now in a place where it feels like this is becoming much more accepted and more supported by the business because it's more easily understood. But we definitely ran into lots of different challenges because it's kind of what we were talking about at breakfast this morning. There was no roadmap for this. It hadn't really been done before. Our team really had to kind of build it as we went along and just continued to learn and fail and build again and try new things all the time. And so I guess to speak to maybe some of the challenges that we ran into initially, for example, we realized that actually to reach low-income communities in a profitable way that also delivers a social impact, it wasn't just about designing new products, right, that meet the specific needs of these learners or customers. We had to really go beyond that and think about innovating the entire business model. So whatever Pearson is used to doing actually had to change in a pretty holistic way. So not just thinking about what are we building, but how are we building it? How are we selling it? How are we marketing this? What is it going to cost to maintain it? And how can we do so at a price that's actually affordable to the people we're trying to reach, and that we can do it at scale? So a lot of the kind of ventures that we're incubating are looking at ways to leverage technology to reach more people. But that also comes with a lot of challenges. So where we might be used to providing a lot of hands-on, face-to-face support as part of selling a product, now we need to think about, how do you digitize that? Can you, which parts can you digitize and what do you still need to do face-to-face? And let's say if you have an online training program that has to be accessed only by mobile phones because people don't have access to laptops, and they also don't have the same kind of internet connectivity that we're used to having elsewhere. And they pay a lot of money for data. So they're actually very careful about what they use their data on. So how do you make sure that a learner and customer like that stays on to the app, right? And continues to engage with it after they've downloaded it? So we're looking at a lot of questions like this. How are you still able to deliver the learning outcomes or the employability outcomes that we're looking for, but to do so in an affordable way, which actually has a commercially meaningful impact for the business?
As many of you might know, Barclays is a bank that operates from both a retail perspective. It, in fact, has relationships with the majority of the people in the UK, as well as from a very institutional perspective through investment banking and corporate banking, and works with a ton of different clients internationally. For Barclays, I think social innovation is really framed in terms of the opportunity. So looking to trends within kind of external markets, there are now 1.9 thousand signatories of the UN Principles of Responsible Investment. And that represents about 65 trillion of assets under management. So that's 65 and then 12 zeros of assets that are looking to be invested responsibly and be tailored towards impacts. And you also have kind of external governments and external organizations and multilaterals who are looking to encourage the focus to go towards impact from this very institutional perspective. So at Barclays, we've had a social innovation facility for about 5 years now. And the facility really operates as that central point within the organization where people can work to come up with products and services that do have an articulated social impact, will have some kind of commercial return, and also build on the corporate assets and expertise of our organization so they can really build at scale, which is something that is hugely important to the work that we're doing within business. We're looking to learn a lot from kind of external partnerships, and we look to work a lot with NGOs, we work with B corporations, we work with multilaterals as well, like I mentioned, when we are developing our products and services so that people can have that access to the ideas that are really on the coalface and understanding exactly what is the kind of trends within the market. We've also seen in terms of how we work with our entrepreneurs, we've had thousands of people who we've engaged through Barclays Social Innovation Facility, and people are able to join, I guess, an internal incubator similar to Pearson's model, where they'll spend several months working on their ideas to develop their products and services before pitching it back for business support and also investment from our kind of social innovation facility, where they can go on to develop proof of concepts, where they can continue to sell them within the business. An example of something that's been an interesting journey is our focus on impact investment. So in the UK, late last year, we launched our first impact investment fund, which was launched in partnership with one of the government entities, Big Society Capital, as well as in partnership with development from kind of the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, which is a hugely important part of our work. And the first fund was available to retail investors and enables you to invest in a product that has both the social impact and the environmental impact from a very measurable, diversified way that you would expect from any investment product. But thinking through, you can make returns as well as having that impact. And we're also something that might be relevant for the community and the team, particularly those that raise their hands as social entrepreneurs, is we're looking to develop products that enable investment directly into social entrepreneurs to make that kind of marketplace for people to seek the types of investment that they're really needing at different stages of their journey, and matching them with some of the investors that we're working with on a daily basis from an institutional angle. So we're really excited about kind of piloting those ideas and working on developing them further with our entrepreneurs from within the organization.
So I guess a question that's coming up for me that I would love for you to be pondering while Caitlin is sharing about her work at J&J is how this is influencing beyond the incubator. So I have this kind of vision in my mind of the whole organism and these kind of pockets of these bright spots within the organization, but how is your work kind of influencing the mainstream, the kind of the heartbeat, if you will, of the organization? But first, Caitlin, we'd love to hear about your work at J&J.
Sure, and thank you for having me. So one thing I would say about this work at J&J is that you feel it in the culture that this understanding of the impact to society at large is not something new at the company, and it's not something that feels optional either. So it's, Maggie mentioned the credo, which is something that was set up before the company went public to be clear to shareholders and the broader community that the company's first responsibility would remain to its patients, to the mothers, to the fathers. From there, you go to doctors, surgeons, nurses, the employees, the communities, and then the shareholders, and in that order. And you do feel that in the culture in terms of how things are measured, in terms of decisions. It's not just an inspirational poster on the wall. You hear people in meetings say, well, the credo would require us to act in this certain way, or would that decision be credo aligned? And business leaders being measured on an annual basis, not just on their performance, but on their adherence to the credo. I've got a lot of colleagues that have been at the company for 20, 25, 30 years, and they'll tell stories about how leaders won't get fired because they miss their numbers, but they will get fired if they get bad results on their credo survey. So just for kind of context and culture within the organization, I think that's something that is important. That kind of commitment does need to come top down, but it was also in how the company was set up, right? It's not a B Corp, but I think that's sort of an early nod to that movement before its time. In terms of social innovation and social impact work, I think we're going through a bit of an evolution where we've been doing some really incredible strategic funding and partnership around impact for a long time, and have realized that we might have underestimated the potential to leverage our business. My colleagues in the room, we actually had a conversation with a VP yesterday who said maybe leverage isn't the best word, but it's encouraging to know it's not just me that uses it, it's in this space. But to think about maximize the business versus leverage. Don't kind of take something that that they're going to be left with less, but to think about all of the tools, the resources, the capability that the business brings to the table, and pair that with financial assets, financial vehicles, and partnerships. And we're thinking about it similarly to how Teodora was mentioning their shift around how you align. We've got regional directors now in all 4 regions that are understanding and mapping the vulnerable population needs of that region in partnership with business leaders so that we can figure out what can we uniquely do as a company. There's a lot that needs to be done in this world. What is our part? Where do we show up in a meaningful way beyond the substantial kind of philanthropic dollars? So I think one example, one of my favorites, is around some of the mobile messaging work we've done for moms and babies. And J&J on the consumer side has an app called Baby Center that has messaging and content for new moms or parents around early pregnancy all the way through to 5 years. And we looked at that content and looked at what some of the needs were in terms of information for pregnant women in low resource settings, and realized that we had both the content, the educational material, and an understanding around behavior and timing, exactly what information would be useful when, not here's a book, can you read it, in your first month and then remember all that information. And so we looked and we mapped that to the messages and information that the WHO was saying was needed, and we're able to leverage the content or the product, so to speak, from Baby Center and move it into more of an analog form. It is an app, but we know when it comes to leveraging technology, it's not always as easy as disseminating an app, right? That isn't always the available technology. So meeting people where they're at, and we've got messaging that goes through text messaging, now also partnership with WhatsApp in South Africa, and we're able to distill that, the messaging, partner with local partners, so from language, from context, that message is coming through in a way that is going to be received well. And in some instances in South Africa, for example, we've partnered with the South African government, and it's now a two-way system. So it's not just pushing out information, but mothers are actually able to give feedback on the clinic that they went to. It either did or didn't have iron pills, or here was my treatment. So it's a loop that we're also looking to support the strengthening of that health system. So that's one concrete example, but I feel, we've just started to scratch the surface. I think inherently the J&J business, there's a lot in there that is a social business at heart, life-saving healthcare products and services. But we're looking at that exact question around how do we make sure that when we say our purpose is to positively transform the trajectory of health for humanity, that we're conscious of what that means for all populations. I'll stop there and we can maybe.
That's great, thank you. So I'll come back to this question of how is this work influencing the whole of the organization. And I think we talked in our breakfast this morning about a step change. How do we move from these bright spots around, kind of peppered throughout the organization, as something that truly is along the lines of the social fiction that Gibb and Andrew mentioned before?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. I would say we're definitely seeing more momentum around this and pickup in kind of different ways at a global level as well as throughout the company. So a couple of examples. I mean, one of the kind of challenges for us has been that we are still asking people to go above and beyond their daily responsibilities and their jobs to be able to do this work. So we say, we'll give you investment, we'll give you technical support, we'll give you, mentors and coaches, but you're still ultimately responsible for everything else you need to deliver on. And that excludes a lot of people from being able to participate. And it also makes things generally move slower, right? And so really, I think the next step would be to give people formally the opportunity to make this, at least as a percentage of their day job, right? And you could view it as a kind of talent and leadership development opportunity. You can see it as, part of the commercial imperative of, okay, we need to get better at innovation, and we see there's an opportunity here for new markets. So let's put some more resource behind it. And to actually put this in people's performance objectives. So I think we still have a way to go in making this a part of the incentive structure. And not just for the people who are participating, because then it gives them more space and cover to be able to dedicate more time, but even their project sponsors, right? Because what we've found is it's essential to have that very senior C-suite level support. But the reality is that if you don't have the people who are actually responsible for the P&L ready, willing, and able to support those teams, you run into a wall, right? And when you speak to them, you see that their incentives are really, again, coming back to the short-term profits and returns and minimizing risk and optimizing everything, our current business. They're not around testing new things, failing, learning, innovating, and taking risks, right? So I think it would be amazing if we could just get that next step of really helping to institutionalize this. Now, the bright spot is that what we've seen in a few markets that had the MDs sponsoring teams from our initial cohort of incubator entrepreneurs now are saying for this next one, when we have the conversation around, so if we accept any teams, would you be willing to put this in their performance objectives and actually give them time to work on this? Now they're saying like, yes, because I've now seen, I understand what this is all about. I do think there's not just a social impact, but a commercial opportunity here. And by the way, the people that are working on it are really happy. So I have like happier employees, which makes everything else I'm in charge of kind of easier. So it's almost like we're seeing that, we're seeing some of those markets pick up. We're also seeing at a global level, people asking things like, can we take this approach and apply it to core innovation? Like, what would that look like? How do we get more of our employees really feeling more empowered and able to contribute to kind of the direction of the company? So I think it's also seen as a way to give your employees a voice and a channel to make a change, which within large organizations, many people don't feel that they have.
That's definitely touched on a lot of great points. I think in terms of your point around social innovation informing innovation more broadly, we've also seen the other way. So innovation really informing social innovation, and us kind of using the same language and skills and tools that have been created over a number of years within the innovation frameworks, whether that's Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation, whether that's human-centered design, but applying those mechanisms to people in a social context is hugely important and valuable from how we're approaching our kind of social innovation. So an example of this at Barclays, of what we're doing, is taking kind of human-centered design concepts and saying, how can you create a product or service that actually is supporting the water challenge? The water systems are changing, precipitation is changing, the flooding is more common because of built environments. How can we approach this from a product, from a financial product, and how can you guys have the opportunity to think through that from the people on the ground who are going to be impacted by these types of changes within the water system? And so using these models and mapping out kind of individuals within kind of challenging areas is a great way for us to kind of use the innovation language as well as the social innovation language. Another important point that I think Teodora raised is around how we're working with all layers of an organization. What's interesting about how we've approached it at Barclays, I think specifically, is it's from a middle management level. And one of the key areas that we've really focused on is the idea that actually the middle managers, who are the ones who are kind of starting to deliver on their P&Ls and might have huge targets that they put in play by their senior leaders, but making them really engaged and integrated in the process of social innovation, both from either sponsoring ideas that are coming through, but also themselves having the opportunity to kind of create that product, that passion product or that passion project on their side that actually has the support from a more centralized view. And then that kind of layers up into being extremely flexible with always kind of looking for sponsorship opportunities from within our organization, and really focusing on how do we find the next person who will talk about this, who will be really focused on helping social innovation be really institutionalized within a big organization. And it's definitely a journey. It's a journey that takes, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But in terms of the progress and the trajectory, we've definitely made huge steps towards the kind of forward momentum and continue to, I guess, share those messages and share the success stories that we do have, as well as the challenges and the areas that we think have less opportunity or aren't necessarily as important to focus on, or aren't possible maybe for an organization like ours to focus on.
Caitlin, I'm curious, so you mentioned the credo at the beginning is like a key kind of pillar of enabling people, right? So I've got this North Star that I'm referencing, which has community at the core. So that seems to be a real fundamental kind of underpinning of your work. I'm just wondering, like, to really make step change with this work, and I think J&J particularly, for those that know it, is a very distributed, kind of decentralized. So it's not easy for the mothership to kind of, dictate from top down. So how do you really see that step change coming about? Like, what's really required to institutionalize social innovation at J&J?
Sure. So I think it's a great question, and I think we're in the middle of trying to answer it ourselves. But I do think, one, it's funny that you said North Star. There is, an effort and an internal effort that we call True North, right? And so talking about, a strategic framework and having leaders accountable to discuss with their team and have in goals and objectives how you're connecting to that credo or to that True North work. So you do have a CEO that's asking leaders, tell me how this is showing up in your world, whether that be the consumer business, pharma, medical devices, et cetera. And I think it is a balance and a healthy tension that probably is served by remaining a healthy tension between trying to set up pathways for entrepreneurs and structures and ways that they feel like they could move forward with their ideas, and also not trying to over manage that or over construct that, because I do think it's a balance. We probably all have these stories where you try to over manage innovation and inspiration, and it just kind of flattens. That's not where the cool kids want to hang out anymore. And so how do you do both of those? We've got a few different secondment programs that are clear paths where anywhere from 4 weeks to 6 months we can place employees with partner organizations. And we've also started reverse secondments, right? Because we have as much to learn, where we're bringing in people from partner organizations for 4 weeks or 6 months on a specific topic. And so trying to make sure that we stay honest about where those weak spots are and where that connection is. Also on the human-centered design piece, we're big fans, and we've got a big recent PDF workbook. I don't have the link off the top of my head, but if you find me afterwards, I can give it to you, where we've actually worked with partners to develop a human-centered design workbook for creating healthcare within low-resource settings with people. So what does it mean to actually include a patient or a nurse or something in the co-creation and co-design of a solution? And I think, and that's coming from the business as well, from the innovation teams, within the organization. The other piece I would note is that I think helping business partners frame and understand what we mean when we say, can we work together, and what would it look like to maximize what you're doing? We're taking, a book out of the regular innovation as well. So we've been talking about this idea of core offerings, adjacent offerings, transformative offerings. That's typical managing innovation, right? HBR articles all the way. And you think about how can we extend our current core offering to other low resource settings or other audiences that aren't your commercial target. Where in the world could we do that just exactly as it is, because it's not going to affect or touch the commercial realities of that product. Second, then adjacent offerings. So what could we do to tweak or evolve or have a small adjustment on something that we offer now as a product or a service, changing the context, changing the delivery method if technology is a barrier, adding technology if that's going to help it scale. And then the third is sort of transformative. What could we do together because of the capabilities we have as J&J and uniquely J&J? And then we're identifying a real need through a human-centered design process, a real need in the market. And we wouldn't necessarily ever go down that path for commercial reasons. But we've got the capabilities. And so what would it take to figure it out and make that happen?